Before the shadows of tragedy darkened his path, Nolan Buchanan's life was a canvas of youthful hope and ambition. At 16, Nolan basked in the warmth of a seemingly bright future. He spent his days as any teenager might, balancing the tightrope walk between adolescent joys and the burgeoning responsibilities of coming of age. A particular Sunday stands out in Nolan's memory as a pinnacle of happiness, spent in the company of his girlfriend and her family, followed by a get-together with friends that capped off with a romantic evening. Waking up on Monday, he felt on top of the world, akin to a successful businessman with endless opportunities at his doorstep. After all, he was on the cusp of inheriting Buchanan Construction, the family business, along with assets that promised a life of comfort and achievement. Nolan envisioned himself steering the company to heights his father couldn't, brushing aside the looming specter of bankruptcy that had haunted his father's tenure. However, this idyllic existence soon spiraled into a vortex of confusion and calamity. On October 1, 2015, Nolan found himself in handcuffs, arrested at his high school. The charges laid before him painted a starkly different future from the one he had imagined. The subsequent trial, which saw a jury deliberate for merely 2 hours, ended with Nolan receiving a sentence that could span a lifetime, with the slim hope of parole appearing only after 25 years behind bars. The swift transition from a life filled with promise to one confined within the cold walls of a cell left many in his community reeling. How could a boy, seen by many as a model student and a kind soul, find himself embroiled in such a harrowing ordeal? This is more than a true crime story. This narrative delves deep into human nature's depths and the unpredictable forces that can lead a seemingly ordinary teen to a dark path. The Buchanan family's cabin tragedy does more than uncover crime details. It takes us on an emotional roller coaster through psychological unraveling and the quest for justice amidst devastation. Exploring Nolan's life and that critical weekend offers insight into human psyche complexities and the pursuit of truth in a story woven with hope and despair. In the quiet embrace of El Dorado County, California, nestled among the verdant hills and tranquil landscapes, a seemingly ordinary weekend unfolded for the Buchanan family. Adam Buchanan, alongside his wife Molly and their 8-year-old son Gavin, sought the solace and reprieve only their vacation cabin could offer. This sanctuary, hidden away from the stresses of their daily lives, promised a respite, a brief interlude of peace and familial joy. Yet, what awaited them was far from the idyllic retreat they had envisioned. As the weekend progressed, an unforeseen tragedy struck, enveloping the cabin in flames. By the time the inferno was quelled, it had razed the structure to the ground, leaving behind only charred remains and the stark silhouette of what once was. Initially, the destruction seemed the result of a catastrophic accident, a cruel twist of fate that snatched away the lives of Adam, Molly, and young Gavin. The community mourned, and the incident was poised to be remembered as a heart-wrenching misfortune. However, the narrative took a grim turn when investigators sifted through the debris. Amid the ashes, human remains were uncovered, telling a story far more sinister than that of an accidental fire. Among these was the discovery of a child's skull, marked by a bullet hole, a silent testament to the violence that had occurred. This chilling find irrevocably shifted the course of the investigation, steering it towards the dark alleys of homicide. Gavin was not Adam Buchanan's only son. Nolan, who was 16 at the time of the tragedy, was Adam's son from a previous relationship. Before the incident, Nolan Buchanan was seen as a model student and an all-around good kid by his neighbors and classmates. Everyone who knew him was shocked to learn that he could have been involved in any sort of criminal activity. Adam, Molly, Nolan, and Gavin were described as a fairly close-knit family, with Adam owning a construction company that provided them with a comfortable life, including their vacation property. Nolan's life before the incident was seemingly normal and happy. He spent his time involved in typical teenage activities and family life. However, it wasn't long before Nolan became a suspect in the investigation. Once it had been discovered that this was more than a terrible house fire, investigators began to suspect Nolan Buchanan's involvement through a combination of forensic evidence, discrepancies in his statements, and the discovery of physical evidence. Initially, Nolan told investigators that his family had gone to their vacation cabin and that he stayed behind to take care of the house. However, this was only the beginning of many discrepancies. Nolan's initial claims to have stayed home instead of joining his family at the cabin were quickly proven to be a lie. When viewing surveillance footage, investigators discovered that he was actually with his family when they visited El Dorado County, California. And it wasn't just surveillance footage. Financial transactions also indicated that not only was Nolan present during the trip to the cabin, but he also used his father's credit card for purchases along the way, and was seen in the area around the time of the murders. Nolan also initially misled investigators by stating that his family used a Dodge truck for their trip to the cabin. Contrary to his claim, surveillance evidence later showed that the journey was actually made in a Ford F-150, a vehicle owned by the Buchanan family. This inconsistency in Nolan's story about which vehicle was used raised immediate red flags regarding his truthfulness and potential involvement in the crime. It was the Ford F-150 that had been seen on surveillance cameras making the trip to and from the cabin around the time of the murders and subsequent fire. Additionally, surveillance cameras captured the Ford F-150 leaving the Valencia Club bar, which Adam and Molly Buchanan visited on their way to the cabin. The vehicle was seen heading towards the cabin late at night with Adam and Molly in it, and later returning in the opposite direction, with only Nolan visible in the vehicle. Credit card transactions made in Bonita, California, after the family was supposed to have arrived at the cabin, indicated that the credit card, and by extension, presumably Nolan, returned to areas near their home. This evidence contradicted his initial claim of not accompanying his family to the cabin, and suggested his direct involvement in the aftermath of the crime. Investigators experienced a stroke of luck when, during a community cleanup day organized by the local high school, students stumbled upon crucial evidence in a business park close to Adam's construction company. On September 19th, they found a small purse containing Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan's wallet and ID cards hidden under a bush, alongside a .22 caliber rifle. Detectives swiftly arrived at the scene, leading to a significant shift in the investigation's direction. The presence of the rifle and the Buchanan family's personal items suggested that the killer had executed the family using the discovered weapon and attempted to obscure their identity by removing any incriminating documents from the scene. This key discovery indicated the murderer had made the journey to Greenwood to commit the crime, only to return to Bonita to dispose of the evidence. The evidence's location, near the Buchanan's business, suggested the possibility that a disgruntled employee might be responsible for the heinous act. Consequently, the rifle and the purse were sent for further forensic analysis. The discovery of Nolan Buchanan's fingerprints on a firearm was a pivotal piece of evidence in the investigation into the murders of his family members. This critical finding connected Nolan directly to the crime, reinforcing the forensic evidence and contributing to his eventual arrest and charges. Here's a rundown on how these elements came together. The autopsy and forensic analysis of the victims' remains revealed that they had sustained fatal gunshot wounds prior to the fire at the cabin. This evidence established that the fire was not the cause of death, but rather an attempt to conceal the murders. The investigation led to the recovery of a firearm that forensic technicians analyzed for fingerprints. Nolan Buchanan's fingerprints were found on the weapon, irrefutably linking him to the gun used in the crime. This was a significant breakthrough, as it physically connected Nolan to the means of the murders. Throughout the investigation, Nolan provided accounts of his whereabouts and actions that were increasingly contradicted by evidence. His initial claims of not being at the cabin and staying home were disproven by surveillance footage, credit card transactions, and now, his fingerprints on the murder weapon. The presence of Nolan's fingerprints on the gun corroborated the forensic findings regarding the cause of death of his family members. It indicated not only that he had handled the weapon, but also implicated him as the person who likely fired the shots, given the absence of fingerprints from any other potential suspects. This convergence of forensic evidence, physical evidence linking Nolan to the weapon, and the unraveling of his fabricated story formed the basis of the case against him, ultimately leading to his arrest and the charges for the tragic murder of his family members. But why did he do it? There is no clear-cut motive in this case. However, following the murders, Nolan Buchanan's actions suggested he was preparing to assume control over the family business, Buchanan Construction. Despite the tragic circumstances, Nolan appeared to view himself as the successor to the company his father once managed. He had discussions with family members about his future role in the business, indicating plans to take over and possibly steer the company in a new direction. This behavior highlights a stark contrast between his immediate response to the family tragedy and his ambitions to inherit and manage the business assets, shedding light on his mindset and priorities during that period. Nolan Buchanan entered a plea of not guilty to the accusations against him, offering an alternate narrative in which he claimed his father was the initial aggressor, having fired on the family. According to Nolan, in a self-defense act, he wrestled the gun away, inadvertently causing his father's death. He described his actions following the incident, including setting the fire, as driven by panic and intense fear, an attempt to erase any sign of the conflict. The defense team emphasized claims of Adam Buchanan's harsh treatment towards Nolan and other family members, attempting to sway the jury. However, a medical examiner pointed out inconsistencies, noting a bullet entry in Gavin's skull that suggested a nearly vertical trajectory, conflicting with Nolan's account of the event's timing and the angle of gunfire he described. This discrepancy led the prosecution to argue that Nolan, alone with his brother while their parents were out, was the shooter, later killing his father and stepmother upon their return. The positioning of the victims' bodies supported this theory. After committing the murders, Nolan is said to have used the rifle to eliminate evidence, set the family's bodies alight, and then crafted an alibi by spending the day with his girlfriend. On July 13, 2018, a jury convicted Nolan of 3 counts of first-degree murder, leading to a 150-year prison sentence, with eligibility for parole after serving 25 years. Judge Kingsbury, while delivering the sentence, acknowledged the severe verbal and physical abuse Nolan endured, suggesting it drove him to kill his brother to spare him from their father's mistreatment. However, she also highlighted evidence of Nolan's calculated actions, including the arson, his attempts to fabricate alibis, and discussions about taking over the family business, indicating premeditation. The judge pointed out Nolan's behavioral issues noted during his time at the South Lake Tahoe Juvenile Treatment Center, emphasizing that change is possible, and urging Nolan to use his time wisely to earn the chance for parole. Despite this, Nolan maintains his innocence and, if paroled, faces the responsibility of compensating the victims' families, though the amount remains undetermined. This story, while deeply personal to those involved, offers a broader reflection on the human condition. Through Nolan's journey from hope to despair, readers are invited to explore the depths of forensic science in uncovering truths buried beneath ashes, the psychology of a young mind navigating through turmoil, and the intricate workings of the legal system that seeks to adjudicate justice amidst a web of complexities. Nolan Buchanan's story is not just a narrative of crime and punishment. It is a poignant exploration of the myriad of ways in which the fabric of our lives can unravel, leading us down paths we never imagined we would tread. There is so much about this story that is truly disturbing, not the least of which is Nolan Buchanan's role in what began as a seemingly tragic accident, to the shocking revelation of a meticulously planned triple homicide committed by a teenager. This revelation alone turned the narrative on its head, but the further investigation into Nolan's actions before and after the murders adds layers of disbelief. Nolan tried to manipulate the evidence, misled investigators about the family's vehicle, and used his father's credit card to create an alibi, all while maintaining a facade of normalcy. The transformation of a high school student into a calculated murderer, convicted of killing his own family for a supposed financial gain, is a chilling and bewildering turn of events that leaves a lasting impact on anyone who learns about the case. But why do you think he did it? For more stories like this, click the link above to learn about the horrific murder of a mother, taken at the hands of her husband in When One Woman Isn't Enough. Stay curious, stay connected, stay with Reely Unreal.